Greetings, Bob Fowler here, recording the fifth and final recording in this series that I've been doing on how Matthew elbowed Mark aside and became the number one gospel. And the image there, never mind that the credit identifies that it came from someone's collection of material on Mark, because this image isn't of Mark. It's soldiers at a tomb and the stone in front of the door of the tomb. The gentlemen in the front there, in the foreground, the three gentlemen look like, to me, they are Jewish. The two guys in the back are Roman soldiers, I think, well equipped with armament and spears and the body armor. I kind of think the guard at the tomb was more likely a Jewish police force rather than Roman. I think it was a Jewish matter, and that's a Matthew thing. The guard at the tomb is Matthew and Matthew only, as we'll talk about. So finally, we're ready to end the story, and Matthew goes on at great length. All the stuff in red you see over there on the right is Matthew and Matthew only. So the red signals difference between the Gospels, and Matthew is the major instigator of difference. And I'm going to read briefly the end of the story in Mark, and then we'll look at the parallel passages together. But Mark first. Mark 15:40. If you have it in front of you, you should, if you've got the handout. There were also women looking on from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James the younger, and of Joseph and Salome. These used to follow him and provided for him when he was in Galilee, and there were many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem. When evening had come, since it was the day of preparation, this is just past the crucifixion of Jesus. It has just taken place. When evening had come, since it was the day of preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council, who was also himself waiting expectantly for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate wondered if he were already dead, and summoning the centurion, he asked him whether he had been dead for some time. When he learned from the centurion that he was dead, he granted the body to Joseph. Then Joseph bought a linen cloth, and taking down the body, wrapped it in the linen cloth and laid it in a tomb that had been hewn out of the rock. He then rolled a stone against the door of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where the body was laid. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there is the place they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee, and there you will see him, just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. A most mysterious, haunting, incomplete, unresolved conclusion to the story, leaving more questions unanswered than answered, more uncertainty, confusion possibly. what on earth to make of a story that ends in terror, amazement, fear, and silence. We'll talk about that. Okay, here are the three women that Jesus has just died. These are the three women looking on from afar. I'll say a little bit more about them after a while. I think I'll hold off for now. Jesus is buried by a stranger, Joseph of Arimathea. In Mark, he's a member of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish council. Matthew elevates him to status as a formally and officially a disciple of Jesus. That's nice. That's really nice. But that's Matthew, not Mark. This is curious. Anywhere you have something in one gospel, but blank in another, space in another, that's noteworthy, it seems to me. 3 times over here, the question is raised, is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead? And the answer is yes, 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 he's really dead. He's out, which seems to me to be Mark's prep for the eventual discovery of an empty tomb. You know, he's not here. He's not here. He's not here. And the fact that he's dead makes it interesting that the tomb is empty. Also, it raises possibilities for Matthew's storytelling. Only in Matthew do we get this bit over here, and this we could chew on for a long, long time. Only in Matthew do we get the business of a guard set at the tomb. The guard story, actually the guard story dominates Matthew's telling of the story of the empty tomb, resurrection appearances, and so on. The guard story gets the most ink. It appears here at the beginning, preceding the empty tomb. It occurs, there's a little mention of it here, when the angel descends and rolls away the stone. Hold that lightly in your grasp, because that's Matthew, not Mark. When the angel descends and rolls away the stone, the guards go into a dead faint. So they are there, but they're not there. And in Christian art, they are portrayed as zonked out, blown away by the cosmic divine experience. And then afterwards, there's the wrap-up guard story. So the guard has a major role in Matthew's telling of the story. This is curious. It's really curious. In Mark's gospel first, but subsequently in the gospel writers who are clearly rewriting Mark, namely Matthew and Luke, and maybe possibly John, but Matthew and Luke for sure. In the synoptic gospels, at least, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the disciples don't even know that Jesus is headed to resurrection. They can't even really comprehend that he's headed towards crucifixion. And this happens again and again and again, first in Mark, and then the other gospel writers play along with Mark to this extent. Mark 8, Mark 9, Mark 10, boom, 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 passion prediction number 1, number 2, number 3, again and again and again. In Mark, Jesus predicts his suffering and death. And oh yes, by the way, after 3 days rise again. Well, they don't hear, comprehend, grasp the prediction of crucifixion. And they sure as heck don't grasp the prediction of resurrection from the dead post-crucifixion. That's completely off the radar. But because not even the prediction of suffering and death is comprehensible to them. So, but Matthew wants outsiders, strangers, to have heard of the prediction of resurrection, and therefore therefore these rascally people, these Jewish troublemakers, surely, if they thought there was skullduggery coming, if the Christians were going to start proclaiming an empty tomb and a resurrection from the dead, well, then maybe we better set a guard. I think personally, what we're dealing with here is a battle of stories. A battle of stories. Did this really happen, in fact, in history? I kind of doubt it, because Matthew was the only person of the 27 books of the New Testament to say anything at all about a guard at the tomb. So you would think that if this was widely known, someone other than Matthew might have referred to it. I think it's Matthew's attempt to tell a story to counter competing stories that surely did circulate among people who did not jump on the Jesus bandwagon. Surely there were stories floating that suggested dishonesty, skullduggery, deception on the part of the followers of Jesus post crucifixion, and Matthew's trying to counter those nasty stories with his own story, which is much more positive and uplifting. So I think this is Matthew offering defensive storytelling. I think that's really what this is all about. So, and again, he spends more time, devotes more ink to the guard before the empty tomb, in the middle of the empty tomb, and after the empty tomb. The guard. He spends a lot of time and effort on that bit of the story, which is curious in a story that you would tend to think would be mostly about resurrection and glory and joy and a path forward in life in the kingdom of God. So that's the fact that this is in Matthew only and in no other gospel is interesting. All right, now let's get down to some serious difference, which I've been preaching from first session on. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. They bought spices so they might go to anoint him. If they're going to anoint the dead body, they're going to need access to it. And so they have the foresight. They anticipate need. They bought spices to anoint the dead body, but they have neglected one thing, that is access to the tomb. Ooh, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb? I can't. I've got a comment. I was going to save it for comments later, but 3 women want access to the tomb. They have this foresight to buy spices. That alone is curious. It's after Sabbath, that is Saturday evening when the sun goes down. That's the end of Shabbat. And so maybe they found a shop open Saturday evening after the sun has gone down and they've been able to buy spices. Or did they wake up the shopkeeper at dawn on Sunday and buy spices then? We don't know. But they had the foresight to buy spices, however inconvenient it might have been for a shopkeeper. But they had the insight, they had the awareness that they needed to buy the spices, but they neglected to get access to the tomb. So that's curious. Matthew doesn't want that. Matthew has them merely wanting to see the tomb, maybe to weep outside it. They don't need to go into it to see it. They do need to go into it in Mark. And they do. In Mark, they enter the tomb, which they find already open. Okay. They did not enlist help to open up the tomb. Golly, who might have helped them? Three ladies, three diminutive females, maybe needed a little male muscle. What about the four brothers of Jesus? Were they in town? We don't know about that. What about the 12 husky male disciples of Jesus? They were in town. Those fishermen guys, Peter, Andrew, James, John, who pull on nets all day, every day, and have very nice biceps, where were they? Were they not available? So they didn't arrange for muscle, which underlines for us the absence of the men. Nevertheless, the tomb is open, and they step inside, and they are blown away. They're bewildered because there's someone in there, and it isn't the body of Jesus. It's a young man, a mysterious young man, dressed in a white robe, sitting on the right side, which is the position of honor and respect in many settings. So it's a wild scene. It's crazy. But Matthew ups the ante tremendously. First of all, the women don't need to go into the tomb because they merely want to look at it or maybe shed some tears outside it. But lo and behold, they arrive at the tomb. There's an earthquake. An angel of God descends from heaven, rolls away the stone, sits on it. His appearance was like lightning and his clothing white as snow. For fear of him, the guard shook and became like dead men. So this is quite a revelation. This is quite amazing. So the young man has become an angel. The already open and empty tomb has had the stone rolled away in front of the eyes of the women. And from this point on, the words are mostly the same. It's either the young man or the angel speaking to the women. He's not here. You're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. He was crucified, for sure, but he is not here. He has been raised up. See the place, now empty place where he once lay. Then go tell his disciples. He has been raised from the dead. He is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him. There. And here the red ink of difference goes wild. In Mark, this is how Mark's gospel ends. Believe it or not. It's stunning. It's remarkable. It's amazing. The three women went out, fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. The end. Terror, amazement, fear, and silence. Silence. The resurrected Jesus at the end of Mark's gospel does not appear to anyone. Everything is left up for grabs. Oh, the women are supposed to go tell the men that he's going ahead to Galilee. Jesus is on the road again. He's going ahead. He's headed north to Galilee somehow, some way. You know, the crucified Jesus is on the road again. He's on the move. Go follow. Go to Galilee, where the story began 16 chapters earlier. That's where it's going to pick up and resume and move forward. So Galilee. Go there. You'll see him there. Just as he told you. But because of the terror, the amazement, and the fear, the women said nothing to anyone. In Greek, it's actually a double negative. They said nothing to no one. You can do that in Greek and it's okay. It just adds emphasis. In English, a double negative cancels out and it becomes a positive. But in Greek, a double negative is perfectly legitimate grammar. They said nothing to no one. So it's silence, silence, silence. And the end of the gospel is fear. Fear and silence, fear and silence. Matthew, we still got fear. We still have fear, but the fear is blown away by great joy. And the women run to tell the disciples. So they're going to do in Matthew what apparently they failed to do in Mark. There's no indication that anyone told anything to anyone. In fact, it's emphatic that nothing was said to no one, literally nothing to no one. So, but the women in Matthew, their joy overcomes their fear, and they run to tell the disciples. But before they can get there, Jesus himself encounters them, and he greets them. He tells them, "Do not be afraid. Go tell the boys I'm going to Galilee. There they will see me." So Jesus reiterates the instructions of the angel in the Matthew version of the story. Oh, by the way, the women fall to his feet and worship him. That's exactly the same word that's used in Matthew's version of the walking on the water, in which at the very end, the disciples in Matthew's telling of the story, they're blown away by their experience. And they fall at Jesus' feet. They do obeisance. They prostrate themselves before him. They worship him. That's the standard English translation. And it's the exact same word in Matthew's water walking story as is used here in his Easter resurrection appearance story. So these women get it. They understand. And they're going to go tell the men because here's how Matthew's gospel ends. The familiar and beloved Great Commission. Only in Matthew. Not a whisper of this anywhere in Mark for sure. And this episode is not narrated in any of the other gospels. While they were going, some of the guard, excuse me, that's the guard. My bad. Again, Matthew wants to give the guard, so that's the guard. Let's get rid of them. So the guard story, here, there, all over the place in Matthew. Here's the Great Commission. Whew. Rescued my reputation here. All right, now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. I don't recall a particular instruction about which mountain, but I'll play along. I'll take Matthew at his word. When they saw him, they worshiped him. There's that word again. This is how proper disciples honor Jesus in this gospel. When they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. Let me come back to that. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age." This is a mountaintop experience. Presumably, Jesus appears in resurrection glory from his home in highest heaven, which that's presumably where he's coming from. Matthew doesn't tell us anything about an ascension. We have to wait until Luke or John to get ascension language. Matthew doesn't have it, but I think it's understood. I think it's implied. So the 11 disciples, Judas has gotten his just desserts. He is no more. Matthew has his version of how that happened. Luke has an alternative, competing version at the beginning of the book of Acts, FYI. So they go to a mountaintop in Galilee, which is, we don't know what mountain this would have been, but it's got to be 70, 80, 90, 100 miles to the north, quite a trudge from Jerusalem. So they have this mountaintop experience of the resurrected, glorified heavenly Lord, but some doubted. Excuse me, you trudge 70, 80, 90 miles from Jerusalem and you doubt a resurrection revelation. I take heart from this. I take some reassurance from this that they're as fallible as they ever were, even though Matthew tries really, really, really hard to bolster the reputation of the 12. But apparently, even in Easter experience, it's possible to be uncertain, questioning, doubtful. They're like us after all, huh? Okay, so, and then the Great Commission, which we could talk about forever and ever and ever. A bit of the seeds of the Holy Trinity there, not fully developed, not yet developed. It'll come though. Give us a few more centuries and we'll have God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit in shape, but not quite yet. But this is the kind of seed out of which the Trinity can grow, and presence of the risen Lord with his followers forever and ever and ever and ever. There are only four male characters at the end: Joseph of Arimathea, Pilate, a centurion, and the young man inside the tomb. Would you have expected other male characters to be included in the story? Yes, I would have hoped that, maybe the four brothers of Jesus were in town for Passover, but putting them aside, what about the 12 male disciples that Jesus had, and who we know were there in Jerusalem with him? So I think Mark is elbowing us very sharply in the ribs when the three women wonder out loud, where might we get some muscle to open this tomb? There's a bloody big stone here and it needs some muscle to move it. So what are we going to do? And I think this is a reminder of the failure of the 12 in Mark's gospel. By the way, in Mark's gospel, I don't think the women succeed any better, because after all, they show up at the tomb and they even enter it, but they run away in fear and trembling and silence, and that's too bad and very sad. And all the other gospel writers from Matthew on will try very, very, very hard to rescue the reputation, not only of the men, but also of the women. In Matthew, it's women who the women who first encounter the risen Lord and do obeisance before him. Okay, the three women. Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and Salome. Mark tells us at this point that these three women and many other women were with Jesus back in his Galilee days. Very sadly, very strangely, Mark has not bothered to tell us anything about these women disciples until the very end of his gospel. I don't know about you, but that really perplexes me, and it saddens me immensely. In those verses, I think it's 1540 and following, three times the three women are referred to, and Mark says other women also went up to Jerusalem with Jesus and the boys. So wherever we saw Jesus and the boys in Mark's gospel, now we are told that the girls, the gals, the women were there also, but Mark has just not bothered to tell us. That's really sad, and it's sad because it's contributed to darn near 2,000 years of male privilege and domination over women, and it's too bad, very, very sad. Awkward, difficult. We haven't seen Mary Magdalene before. We haven't seen Salome before, but we perhaps have seen Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, before. And this is tough. This is really, really hard. In the Gospel of Mark, we've already seen Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. She appears in chapter 6, verse 3. Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. That's the mother of Jesus. So why doesn't Mark at the ending of his gospel call her the mother of Jesus? Well, I'm afraid there's an answer to that. You can read Mark 3, I'll give you chapter and verse, Mark 3:21, and then verses 31 to 33, and then chapter 6, verses 3 and 4. Mark 3 and Mark 6 reveal to us that in Mark's version of the story, Jesus and his family are estranged. Jesus and his family are estranged, and we could chew on that at great length, but we don't have time. In Mark's gospel, Jesus and his family are estranged. So I think Mary, the mother of James and Joseph at the end of the gospel, is the mother of Jesus. But she doesn't understand what's going on, and she's not going to perform any better than Mary Magdalene or Salome or the guys. Well, at least the women showed up. They couldn't overcome their fear in Mark's telling of the story, and there's no sign that they told anyone what they experienced. But so this is awkward. This is very difficult. No wonder John's gospel wants to put the mother of Jesus at the foot of the cross. And she and the beloved disciple agree to look out for one another for the rest of their lives. So Jesus takes care of mom by handing responsibility for her care over to the beloved disciple in John's gospel. So the mother of Jesus is at the foot of the cross in John's gospel, and Jesus takes care of her, but it's a much sadder, more painful account in Mark. I've already talked about the spices and so on. The young man, let me skip past. In person, maybe at Trinity, we could have a few minutes to talk about the young man. There are two places in Mark where a young man appears. One is in Mark 14:51, and the other is here in 16:5. 14:51, 16:5. The first young man is distinguished by his nakedness, which kind of sounds like baptism talk, I think. And then 16:5, he's distinguished by his garb, white robe, which sounds to me like baptism talk. That's a hint at where I would go with that. Gotta wrap this up because I've gone over time. I can't emphasize enough that in Mark's telling of the story, not Matthew's, but in Mark's telling of the story, the three women flee from the tomb. They run. In the English translation that we're using, it says terror, amazement, fear. Terror, amazement, fear. And they said nothing to no one. Nothing to no one. Silence. So the story ends without resolution. The story ends without a happy ending. Matthew provides the happy ending. The women first encounter the resurrected Jesus, and then the 11 guys get a mountaintop encounter with him. Glory, 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 hallelujah in Matthew, but not in Mark. And why is Mark telling us a story like this? I think Mark is dumb like a fox. Mark tells a story that's incomplete and unresolved as a dare to his audience, that is to you and me, to complete the story on our own, to fill it out on our own. If the disciples if it's uncertain whether the disciples are going to go to Galilee, and I think Galilee means by now, wherever Jesus leads and wherever anyone follows. I think Galilee here is a symbol for Christian discipleship, and the openness, the lack of resolution at the end of Mark's gospel is a dare to all of us to pick up and succeed where both the men and the women in Mark's gospel failed. You and I are responsible for completing the story. That's the challenge. That's what Mark is about. Mark's story was too mysterious, too radical, too demanding, too challenging to live with, at least for Matthew. So he softened it and clarified it. Puzzles were solved, mysteries clarified, and a gloriously happy ending added. And thus did Matthew elbow Mark aside and become the #1 gospel. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your participation. I hope this sparks some reflection, and I look forward to conversation. Thank you. All the best.